Right, hello, welcome to part 6, and this is going to be unwrapping now. So this is the halfway stage of this beginning Blender course. So part 6, unwrapping. And basically unwrapping refers to the concept of taking a 3D object and turning it into a 2D plane or a 2D map. And then once you've got a flat 2D plane or 2D map, you can then create a texture for it, hence texture mapping. So, yeah, let's just get me epic pen. So say, for example, we've got this cube. Imagine if you opened this cube kind of thing to lay it flat. Well, you'd have sort of a 6-sided thing like that. Kind of like, I guess if you remember when you was a kid, you had them like kits where you folded stuff into a, into a shape of some kind. It could be an animal or something basic. And then you create the full kind of shape, hence the cube. And we don't even have to draw that, because what we can do, if we go to UV editing, and that's the best way in general with UV editing. You've got your 3D viewport on the right and your UV editing screen on your left. So yeah, as I just drawn in that, there's your cube, and there it is laid flat as a 2D plane. So you've got your 3D mesh. After unwrapping, it becomes a 2D plane. So I guess the best way to think about it is, imagine if that was a Christmas present and you've wrapped it up. You've got some kind of box. Pretend there's a ZX Spectrum in there. Sorry, it's an obsession of mine. Pretend you've got a ZX Spectrum in this box. And you're wrapping it up, you're back in the 80s. Let's turn wireframe on. In. And you're wrapping this up. Well, for UV unwrapping, imagine unwrapping it. You've wrapped it, so imagine unwrapping it in a controlled way. So instead of just tearing it all apart, you'll unwrap this item in a controlled way. So imagine if you just unwrapped that face there, you take the tape off there, and this would fold down, wouldn't it? So it was flat. Well, that's basically the concept of UV unwrapping. Imagine if you've got a world, a globe. There's your globe. That's where I am, in the UK. And that's where I'd like to be, which is Norway. You got all your places here. Imagine unwrapping this globe. Well, what it would become then, it would become a world map. You're looking at a map then of the world. So that's the basic concept of unwrapping, that is. So if we add, for example, let's add a mesh, UV sphere. Let's just move it so it's not intersecting with that, so it's a bit tidier. You have to be in edit mode to view your UVs. So you can select our cube, go to edit mode, hit A. There's our 2D map. Let's go out of edit mode into object mode, edit, A to select all. Well, look, there's our 3D object. There's our 2D map. And yeah, these are simple objects. Obviously things get a lot more complex if you're unwrapping something like a human head, for example, or an animal, organic stuff. That's where you need to be more strategic about, think about things a lot more. So the UV part, you might think, well, what's UV? It basically just means XY. Because we've already got our XY in our XYZ coordinate system in 3D, we don't want to be duplicating it. So the UV just relates to XY. X, Y. And that's what it's been known as for since the start, really, unwrapping. I mean, I remember back in 3ds Max, back in the early 2000s at university, it got quite complex, to be honest, unwrapping back in the day. But as 3D software's evolved, it's got a lot easier, really. Can be a bit tedious at times, but it's just one of them steps in 3D of the pipeline that you've got to do. So let's explore some of the techniques behind UV unwrapping. Let's hide this sphere. Let's work on this cube. I know this cube's actually unwrapped. But the core technique behind UV unwrapping is you'll be going into edit mode and you'll be in edge mode. What you want to do, you want to be in edge mode. And an edge is where you define your seams. I bet you're thinking, what's a seam? Well, basically, the seam is an edge, yeah. But it's where you'll mark a seam in Blender. And when this object unfolds, or unwraps, is a technical term, Blender will look for these seams and it'll find the best way of unwrapping it flat based on these seams. So let's just show an example of these seams then. So we're in edge mode. We can select these edges. And if we right click, we can go to mark seam. Yeah. And when you mark the seam, notice how they've turned red. All seams by default, I mean, you can probably change it in the preferences, yeah, but not worth it. They'll be red, which I think, to be honest, is the best colour to denote the seam. So we've added that seam there. Let's select these edges at the bottom here. Let's again right click, mark seam. Now if we hit A to select all, and then we'll hit U, unwrap, angle based. Look how it's unwrapped it. It's unwrapped. We go into face mode. It's unwrapped that face at the top, that face at the bottom. And then if we hit Control L, remember that one, important command that. Control plus L means you'll select the linked parts of a mesh, linked areas, Control and L. Oh, look how it's unwrapped it, look. Which is correct. That's how you'd want it to unwrap it. We'll go more into these UV settings in a while, but in your UV editor you can select your vertices and you can move them around this UV window. So that's a square UV editor window, that in general you can work to 1K, 2K is 2048 times 2048. A lot of the time though these days you'll work to 4K textures. Some people go to 8K, but it's too much really, unless you want super really high fidelity, high quality details, but 4K is generally the go-to these days. So that's your UV editor window. There. And if you've unwrapped an object and you want to re-unwrap it, you can just go in again, for example into edge mode. You could select these seams there, right click, mark seam, hit A, unwrap, angle based. Now you can see seams on the whole of it now, so obviously that will be how it unwraps. There's your faces there, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you've unwrapped that cube now, and it's nice and flat there. You can apply a texture, for example. Let's just show. Let's go into object mode. Let's unhide our sphere. Into edit mode. If we go to select loops, edge loops, right click, mark seam, A to select all, unwrap, minimal stretch. We've got both sides of the sphere there laid flat. And that's a good one, that is. You'll use either angle based or minimum stretch a lot when you're unwrapping. That's the main two things that I use. Sometimes cube, cylindrical or sphere projection, but angle based and minimum stretch. And formal. So yeah, just hit U and you'll bring up your UV mapping menu. If you right click, that brings up a menu for marking a seam, clearing a seam. Obviously if you've marked a seam you can also clear it. So I've just cleared the seam there now. So that's the basics of UV unwrapping. Marking a seam. Obviously a step before that you need to be in edit mode and you'll mark your seam. You'll unwrap, usually minimum stretch. After you've unwrapped, you'll go into your UV editor, do any tweaking you need. After that, you want to assign a checker map, which we'll go to in a bit. And the checker map is just to check that there's minimal stretching. Because when you're texturing, if you've got a lot of UV stretching, you can obviously stretch the texture, and you don't really want that. So yeah, there's more details about this in the PDF, where I think I'll unwrap a cylinder as well. Let's just quickly do that to show you. It's add a mesh. What did we say? A cylinder. Let's go into edit mode. Let's just add a couple of cuts. I mean, that cylinder, let's hide our sphere. That's what a basic arm, form of an arm and a leg is, isn't it? Cylindrical shape. So imagine if that was on the inside. Let's just hit delete on the numpad to zoom in. Imagine if that's your inside leg. What you'd want to look for is you'd want your seams in a concealed area. So this is more visible in a game or a film. The inside leg's not so visible, and the inside arm as well. So that's generally where you'd have a seam. So if you select loops, edge loops, go to the bottom, select loops, edge loops, right click, mark seam, A to select all, unwrap, minimum stretch. Quite simple, isn't it? Compared to what it used to be back in the day, believe me. So there, you've got that command there, selects the island. Vertices, edges, faces, island. That's known as a UV island, that is. UV island. That's an island, that's an island. There's your top and bottom planes. There's your leg. So that's ready for painting or applying a texture to. So yeah, I'll show you that in a PDF, as I say. So some good useful information in there. So I think what we'll do then, we might not unwrap it all, depends on the time. I want this to be now, well, I'll say an hour and a half. I don't really want to go that much in UV editing, because it's not the most exciting, excuse me, subject. Let's have a drink. It's not the most exciting subject, UV editing, but it's an important thing. So let's hide this cylinder. Let's go to File, Append, and let's append we append R2. R2D2 maybe. Yeah, why not? So there's R2. What we've done in our previous lessons. Let's hide that. Let's hide the rig. And let's have a look what we got. So we've got a few objects going on here. So let's hit / to isolate the head. Now, how would we go about unwrapping this? Well, you want to think logically, really. Let's go into edit mode. It's moved it to the origin there. So we've got animation on it. So actually, let's go to animation. Oh yeah, that was, yeah. It doesn't start at the origin, does it? I forgot that. So let's go back to our UV editing. Zero on the numpad. Not zero, the dot, delete, sorry. On the numpad to zoom in. Edit mode, edge mode. Let's select these seams here around this eye bit. Right click, mark seam. I think if we go to select loops, edge loops, let's mark that seam. And then if that's the back of the head, it's less seam. So you can select these there. Right click, mark seam. So that's our seams. Let's mark this as well. Is that marked? No. Mark seam. I to select all. U to unwrap. Minimum stretch. So there's our 3D mesh. And there's our 2D result of unwrapping the head. So once you've got it unwrapped there, let's go through a few things on the UV editor. So this section here, that selects vertices that you can move. That's your edges, that's your faces. Main thing you'll use though is UV island or vertices, them are the main two. Before you go to island, you can use the usual tools to make things look tidier. So you want to stay inside your UV tile. So that could be moved to there. Depending on how much detail you want, you can scale things up. If this was a full character, what you'd do, you'd really pack things in. Like you'd have an eye. If it was all one mesh, in general, you'd have an eye separate. But I was just working on some of the other day, and it was just one complete mesh, not parts like antenna, grill. You'd have everything packed in. It'd be all packed tightly. UV packing. Everything would be packed in here. But we're not going that. We're just introducing the basics of UV unwrapping here. So once you've got something unwrapped, one of the best procedures is to assign a map to it of some kind. And that's to check the stretching. So if you hit new there and go to base colour, image texture, open, I think somewhere here I've got let's try and find my blender. Yeah, UV1 there. And then hit viewport shading. You can see that there's like a checker pattern. But you want to see these squares smaller. So what you want to be doing, you go to shading, click on your UV one you've just assigned, hit Control T, and that's your render node wrangler, that is, and that allows you to change the scale. And if it doesn't work when you click Control T, you need to go to Edit, Preferences, and enable Node Wrangler. It's not enabled by default in Blender, but Node Wrangler, that will enable your Control T, your mapping coordinates. So if we now go back to UV editing, we can see that that map is in our UV editor, and we can see that the tiles are smaller. And if we come out of overlays, look at these tiles, look, they're nice and uniform. And that's what you want when you're unwrapping. A nice uniform distribution over your mesh. Obviously, on a face and more organic stuff, you're always going to get a little bit of stretching. You can't help a little bit of stretching. But as long as on the whole, it looks quite uniform, that's where your seams are there. So it's going to be a little bit different. Remember where we cut our seams there? But that's what you want to be looking for in general. And if we now go into there and hit scale, you can see that it goes bigger and smaller. Bigger for more resolution and detail, smaller for less. But the important thing is it's quite uniform. And as I say, you can adjust. Remember to go into vertex mode. You can adjust your vertices to try and achieve less stretching. But stretching to that extent, not really going to affect it. As I say, you're always going to get some slight bit of stretching. If you don't want to see your UV map, it's a bit annoying there. You can just simply press the X. If you want to see it again, there, press X there. It'll still be available in your materials 3D viewport there because you've got your material, which is that. You won't see it there. So that's the head. Let's go back into object mode. Let's rub that out. Go back into overlays and shade, viewport shading. Not shading, sorry, or solid mode. Let's hit /. What about the body? Let's hit /. Now that's a cylindrical shape, isn't it? Cylindrical. So let's go into edge mode. I mean, because it's cylindrical, a lot of cylindrical and basic meshes are already unwrapped as well in Blender, like the cube. But I like to keep it more neat personally and go in there and do it myself. So what I'll do is I'll select loops, edge loops, right click, mark seam. I'll tell you what I haven't done, which is naughty, is I haven't turned my screencast keys on. I apologise about that. I've turned them on now down here. So for the rest of it you'll see I'll be repeating a lot of what we've done so you can see them there. So we've marked our seams there. That's, say, the front of R2. So let's go, say, along the back. It's maybe seeing less. Select these edges here. We're just holding shift to select more. Shift selecting. That all of them. And by the lip, yeah. Right click, mark seam. Just move that. Let's select these edges here. Right click, mark seam. A to select all, U to unwrap, minimum stretch. And that's unwrapped it nicely, hasn't it though? That's a decent unwrap. Again, if we select all, we can rotate. Move. Scale it a touch so it's inside the UV window. Control L for linked, or select the island. Move it into place. Let's go into object mode. Let's assign, was it material 1? So if you're rushing, you'll miss stuff. Let's name that UV checker. If we go to material preview, we've got a nice little unwrap again. I just can't believe, really, how simple it's got compared to many years ago. And Blender, some great tools really for unwrapping meshes. There's also another way of checking you can assign a texture like that, but we'll go more into this probably in the next lesson really. But if you hold Control, right click over that, you've cut it now. So you've got nothing now. You've got no material on it. But what you can do, if you go to Shift A and let me find texture, checker texture, hook up your colour to your base, go to your layout, you can get a checker pattern like that, or assigning a checker texture. Shading. Let's just go to Control T again. Change the scale of that to 5. There's your checker texture again. Is it UV? That's it. UV to your vector. And there's a nice checker texture, and you can see it's pretty much even really. Nice and uniform. So that's another way of checking your UVs are uniform. So Control, I prefer that method, but I'm just showing you another alternative. So that's the cylindrical forms unwrapped here. Let's have a look at the legs. Let's isolate that. And how would we go about unwrapping these legs? Well, I've got a mirror modifier. Oh, I haven't got a mirror. Let's go to UV editing again. Forwards object mode. / to isolate the legs. Let's think about it logically then. Let's go into edge mode. Let's select along these seams here on the leg. Select edge loops. Select that and go to select edge loops. Loops. There, I think that's all of the inside leg, isn't it? Yeah. Right click, mark seam. That's the inside bit of the leg. Let's go to A, unwrap minimum stretch, just to see what that gives us. And you'll see there it says unwrap failed. It's because you haven't got enough seams, that. So you can't work out 100% way of unwrapping it. If we undo that again, and select one of these outside ones, select loop, edge loop. Now is that all the outer ones? Yep. I'm just checking I've got all the outer ones in. It looks like I have. Let's go to U. Sorry, right click, mark seam. And then we could have the bottom bit as a plane. Right click, mark seam. A to select all. U, minimum stretch. Fail to solve 3 of 7 islands. More seams needed. So it has unwrapped it, but we still need more seams for it to be 100% correct. So that's one thing you'll see. The reason is this area here, the inside. So let's come out of transparent, select loops, edge loops, right click, mark seam. Let's go inside, select loop, edge loops, mark seam. You'll need a cut across there. So right click, mark seam. You've got to think about everything's got to be flattened. If you haven't got the seams there to make it 100% flat, not going to unwrap. So let's mark a seam there. Let's see what we've missed. Minimum stretch. So we've still got a couple of seams needed in here. Which I'd imagine is around this area at the bottom. But if you look there, the bulk of it has unwrapped how you'd expect it to unwrap. Nice and flat. You've got your inside and outside leg, your inner parts, your top and bottom parts, your grill bit, your insides. And I'll tell you what it relates to. I've just realised that this is one mesh, and we've applied our mirror modifier, I believe, yeah. It's relating to the other side, I think. I believe the other side isn't unwrapped properly. But that's give you a good idea there of how you go about unwrapping stuff. It's basically marking seams on your mesh and then selecting it all and unwrapping. If we select our legs there, material, UV checker, you can see a nice clean pattern again, can't we there? Nice squares. Uniform, which is what you want. Nice uniform squares. And I think we're probably just going to assign simple materials to this to start with. I'm sure that, yeah, lesson 7 is texturing. So we'll assign some simple textures and materials. Maybe do a bit of hand painting for the texturing lesson. So yeah, nice and uniform. If you wanted to unwrap this simple cylindrical shape there, because it's a primitive shape, it's already unwrapped for you. Sorry. So yeah. Let's go into grayscale and let's go to let's hide R2. Let's go to File, Append, Minecraft Character. That's what we've done in the last lesson, so let's hide the rig. So the most important part really on this one would be the face, because you'd want probably different material to the eyes and the mouth than you've got for the head. So what we'll do now, we'll have a little look into unwrapping that. So let's go through this. So you go into edge mode. We've got our shape key applied there, haven't we? We have a shape key on that. Yes, there's a mouth. Let's just disable that for now. It's still going into, it's still showing it in edit mode, isn't it? And I think that's to do with, bear with me here. Let's just check that. Right, apologies, I was just checking something on armature. I thought it was something to do with the cage setting, but it's not. when he was going into edit mode, he was going into the blink we created. You just click on the shape key that you want. So you click on basis there. Now we can unwrap. So if we select our head / to isolate, what we can do, we'll go into edit mode. We can mark a seam on this eye here. So select these inner edges here, the eye. Right click, mark seam, so that's the eye area. And if we do the same on the mouth here, mark seam. Now we want to unwrap it in a cube type of way, don't we? So let's just, can we select loop? Yeah, select that loop. Right click and mark seam. Let's select this loop here. Oh, we've got a bevel modifier, haven't we? So we've got to be careful here. Let's select that around there. Yeah. Mark that seam. Let's select into that and that. Mark seam. And we get, well, what I'll do, this beginner series for the first 12 lessons, it's going to be quite simple concepts really. Later on down the line I'll unwrap a full human head and we'll get more complex with everything. Looking forward to doing stuff on the fly and working faster and not worrying about these PDFs and getting everything perfect, but I wanted to do the basics first. So that's how it's going to be to start with. We've got all our seams. Let's hit A, U, minimal stretch. Now we can see if we select our islands, we've got our different faces. That's an island, that's our eye, I believe. Yeah, the eyes and the mouth. Scale that a touch. Let's scale that. You don't want any overlapping UVs either. So in your UV editor here, scale things down a touch. So you've got nothing overlapping. Because that back in the day that used to crash your machine. And it may still do. You've got overlapping UVs, especially if you're applying normal maps. Things like that. I'll just spread things out. You've got our faces there. That is the mouth. Move that over. That's your two eyes. So you could create a simple texture map. We will in the next lesson. I'm going to apply that. So if we go into face mode and select those three, you can see if we hit A that is the two eyes and the mouth, so they're separate, so we can apply some different colours there. You can do it via your materials, which we'll do as well, but I'll say the next lesson's texturing, so we'll probably apply a simple map and do a little bit of drawing on there just to show how a texture map's applied. So that's the head. Let's hit /. And the good thing with Blender as well, if we hit spacebar now, because we appended it, it appends everything, your armature, your mesh, and your animation data to the file. They're all file We'll save that. It's part 6 unwrap. So let's just do that for the arm here. Let's go into edit mode. Edge. What we could do. Go to select loops, edge loops. Select loops, edge loops. Zoom in to check, right click. Mark scene. Select loops, edge loops. Zoom in to check, it's got the inner bits there, yeah. Mark scene. Then we want the two faces at the top. We'll mark scene. Then if we mark a seam on this bit here, then we've got the sleeve part, haven't we? Sounds like he's got a t-shirt on. Did we mark that as a seam, or did I mark it as a sharp by accident? Mark seam. Clear sharp. I think I marked that as a sharp. We don't really want that. Let's go to A. Unwrap. Minimum stretch. There's all our faces again. Control L. Control L. Let's go into transparent. Select these faces. Yeah, Control L to it's linked. So these ones here is the sleeve area. That's your sleeve. Should be separate. These bottom bits. Put these down here. Control L. Move that down there. Move that. Them to come out of island mode. Them vertices, move that up. Let them vertices down. Control L. So this upper bit here is sleeve part, and the lower bit going to be the skin. We'll apply that as a texture map. I think what we'll do later on is we'll just have that material for that part, the material for the bottom part. So It'd be the same kind of thing for your legs, really. But that's just this bit's the sleeve on that, the arm. But the same bit on the leg, that's the skin, but that's going to be the skin on the bottom. We'll save that for the material lesson. But I will unwrap the body though, so he can apply a little, as if he's got some kind of shirt on. So let's forward slash to isolate, into edit mode, edge, select loops, edge loops, shift select the edge, select loops, edge loops. Let's grab that one, that one, that one and that one. Right click, mark scene, I to select all, U to unwrap. And let's just go through a couple of the other options then. So project from view. If you look at that cube, it's the same in the UV editor. That's project from view. It just projects basically the view, the same in the UV editor. Can be used sometimes if you've got a very simple object and the camera's not going to move. Not very useful really for games and films where the camera's moving quite a bit. That's project from view. So let's Control Z on that. Let's just rub this out. We've got project from view bounds. It fills it, same as before, but it just fills out the UV window. Unwrap. Smart UV project. Brings up options. You leave it at default and click unwrap. It kind of gives you different parts, which is what the minimum stretch does, yeah. But that can be useful as well. On these primitive objects, that's probably a better option really. Smart UV project. But minimum stretch kind of gives you the same kind of result really. Angle based, same kind of result. Conformal, same kind of result really. Light map pack. That's it, it fills it all out but cuts all the individual faces. So he's filled the whole of the tile, laid every single thing flat, every single polygon, 2, 3, 4, all of them flat. Rub that out. Unwrap. Then you've got your cube projection like that. Cylindrical. And spherical. Obviously these ones are used more for, obviously that's your cube. Then you could select an island there. Move it. But obviously it's no good unwrapping a cube with a spherical sphere form, because it's not that kind of form. As I say, I usually generally stick to angle based or minimum stretch. That's the two you'll use mostly. So we've used minimum stretch on this. Let's just move it so it's not overlapping so we can see what's going on. That's your front and back. Just scale that down. So yeah, some of the tools you'll use in the UV editing window, which is there, like UV editor. You'll obviously use your move tool, as I've been doing there. You could rotate stuff to make it more aesthetically pleasing, I guess, as you're applying the map. Scale stuff. That's your main thing you'll use. That's your gimbal for all of them. Rotate, move and scale. Annotate if you want to make some notes of some kind. This is for ripping a region, this is. So, you may want to rip a vertex. I'll say it properly now. So remember, you've got to be in vertex mode there. We're using island mode there. Remember that. Island, face, edge, UV. UV, which is basically vertex. So you want to be in vertex mode. If you go to rip region, you've ripped that vertex now. You've pulled it apart, so that's known as ripping a region. So they're no longer connected. So it's basically like getting a vertex there and just pulling it apart. Ripping a region. Used it the odd time, but not very often in all honesty. This grab is useful for, it's a bit like the what do you call it, proportional editing grab is, where you'll move like the surrounding vertices as well. So it's moving like a few, not just the one, as in grab mode. And then these two, relax. If you grab that and you go to relax, you'll relax it back to the position it was in. Whereas pinches it. Can be useful as well, especially when you're unwrapping a face. I find these two can be useful to get rid of stretching in various areas. So yeah, that's pretty much the tools in the UV editor window. And you've got your strength there, if you've grabbed that, for example. And you want to relax it back at a lower strength. So adjust your strength there. There's options here as well for mirroring something in the x-axis, merging, splitting, minimise the stretch, various options there. You can unwrap here instead of pressing U. So I've been pressing U to unwrap here. Whereas you can also go to your options at the top. So unwrap. And your various face modes, stuff there, vertex, edge, UV, as I've just said. You can mark your seams by hitting the menus as well. Copy and paste UVs. Quite self-explanatory really. Image. You can open an image, which we'll do in the next lesson. You can open a texture and apply it there. Various views. I believe if you hit N, you can move stuff there as you can with the N panel over here. You can move islands and vertices and stuff around. T is your toolbar there. Size. Basically brush size. So that's your UV editor window. So yeah, there's not that many tools you'll need, really. Well, so I've contradicted myself. There is tools, obviously, quite a few you'll need, but what I'm saying is kind of like sculpting, really, where you use grab, clay, move, things like that, just 5 or 6 brushes. There's probably 5 or 6 core options in UV editing as well that you'll use, like obviously your marking seam, U to unwrap, right click, which brings up your seams. But yeah, just probably 5 or 6 core options, really. You can unwrap as well by right clicking in your UV editor. But that is basically the basics of unwrapping. You need to be in edit mode. These red edges are your seams. Then you select all, U to unwrap, and select the unwrap option you want. And that, guys, is the basics of unwrapping. Obviously gets more complex with organic subjects, but I want to go into that more in depth when the basics are done. So yeah, that's the ins and outs of unwrapping stuff in Blender. So hope you enjoyed that one, and I'll see you in the next one where we're going to add a few textures to these things. And just before we finish, let's just assign, let's go into our material there, UV checker. And as you can see, like I've said, another important, one of the things which is very important, is that you've got nice uniform checker pattern when you UV and stuff. And that's so things aren't stretching. Because if they're stretching too much, you won't be able to texture them or texture paint them to a decent standard. So yeah, that's that looks decent. Let's just assign it to that as well, UV checker. We can see we got a nice map there, so we'll apply texture in the next lesson. Show the basics of texturing. So yeah, there you go. Your Minecraft character's waving goodbye. It's goodbye from him, and it's goodbye from me, as the two Ronnies used to say. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers, guys. See you next time.